Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Camino Cafe. We're so happy to have you join us and meet Father Steven Rindahl, and he is based out of San Antonio. And today we're going to talk to Father about his particular Caminos and some of probably his other pilgrimages that he's taken around the world. But he also runs a 501c called Warriors on the Way, and we will talk about that in a separate video. But for this particular interview, we're going to talk to Father Steven all about his pilgrimages. So welcome, Father Steven. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be on.
Thank you. Well, I guess we're just going to start with, all of us, when we go on a Camino pilgrimage, we seem to have some type of transformation. Things change about ourselves. And we want to start off with just asking you, what did you notice about yourself after you got back from maybe your first Camino or the most memorable Camino? And if you could just reflect with us on what changed about you? How did you transform?
Okay. Well, to start with, the reason why I went on my first Camino is I was retiring from the Army. I started my life in the Army as a young man who was really only wanted to do two things in life, and that was to jump out of planes and go to war. And a couple months later, I was jumping out of planes. It was 21 years later, I went to war. So after a grand total of 31 years in service, I got to the point where retirement was inevitable. And I started planning for my retirement and realized that to simply get up one day and not put a uniform on was not a good transition plan. It may be a transition, but it certainly wasn't a plan. And so I needed some time, and I needed some time that I could be sort of uninterrupted and think and pray and discern how to move forward in life. So I was familiar with the Camino. I had learned about it. I had read about it multiple years earlier, and then somewhere in that process out came the movie The Way, which of course everybody in the United States who goes on the pilgrimages watched, I think, pretty close to anyway. And I realized, well, here's my opportunity. I've been putting it off for just a lack of the opportunity to spend that much time away, to get that much leave at one time. And so this was my opportunity to go and do the Camino. And I would be able to accomplish what I wanted, to be left alone and walk and pray and just discern how to move forward in a post-Army life. And the reality is I was at that point working through my own combat experience. And by the standards of modern combat, my battalion was hit pretty hard. And so in the time, I spent 15 months in Iraq from October of 2006 to October of 2006 until January of 2008. So anyone that's familiar with the calendar, that means that I missed 2 Thanksgivings and 2 Christmases, all in the same deployment. So 1 deployment, 2 ruined holiday seasons. Ruined might be an overstatement because there was some good ministry done while I was there, but it's not the same as being home for those holidays. But I did a lot of memorial ceremonies. I did a lot of grief counseling. Bottom line is I buried a lot of people while I was gone. And that was weighing on me more heavily than I realized. And so I wanted some time to process that. Knowing about the Camino, knowing kind of, not necessarily what to expect every day, but just sort of the highlights, I realized that the Cruz de Ferro was a major part of the Camino Frances anyway, and the leaving of the stones representing burdens you want to leave behind, particularly coming from a position as a person of faith, leave at the foot of the cross. And when I was deployed, I was a member of the 1st Cavalry Division, which is stationed at Fort Hood, which is here in Texas. And so prior to my going to Santiago, I drove up to Fort Hood. It's a couple hours away. and went out to the training areas where we trained in preparation for our deployment to Iraq. And I collected a stone for each of those people in my battalion that were killed as a result of our combat experience during that deployment. And so I carried those. And upon arriving at the Cruz de Ferro, I celebrate, if you're familiar, you've got the Cruz de Ferro that's relatively close to the road. There's the chapel that's always locked, which I haven't figured out who has the key to that yet. I'd love to find that out. But then there's a couple picnic tables under some nice pine trees as well. So not being able to get into the chapel, I set up at one of the picnic tables and celebrated the Mass and made a special intention of each one of those men that had been killed as the intention of the Mass. And then afterwards went out and by name placed all of those stones at the foot of the cross, the Cruz de Ferro. The majority of our wounded and majority of those killed in action occurred in the month of May 2007. It's a particularly bad month for us. And the result of that, and I didn't realize it when I first got home, but it took a few years to realize what was going on subconsciously, is that every May I would grow agitated, I would grow upset, I would grow angry, and really not know why, but I was just really keyed up during the month of May. Well, after it happened for a few times and I started doing some introspection and realized it's like, oh, there's some unresolved problems and they all revolve around this month. And May 19th happened to be our worst day. We had a catastrophic loss of a vehicle that was ambushed with multiple people inside. And so May 19th would kind of be the apex of my agitation. And so I'm at Cruz de Ferro, celebrate the Mass. I name each of the individuals in prayer. I leave their stones at the foot of the cross and turn and say, okay, at this point, I'm leaving this and I'm turning to look at what my future in ministry is. And I kind of had it in my mind that I would be, that the Camino would be intentionally leaving military ministry behind and shifting to some form of civilian ministry and discerning how that would work. Well, what happens with plans, they last until the first moment and then something else happens. So we can talk about that in a minute, but the result was that Cruz de Ferro experience was completely transformative. And I didn't realize it at the time. I was walking away and I realized that there was a significant change there. And that's actually the day Warriors on the Way as an organization was born. It was only, at the point, it was just an idea. But as I was walking away, I said, this is really healing. And at the time I realized I didn't know how much. And I'm talking to myself as I'm walking away. And I said, it's really healing. I don't know how much yet, but it's a lot. I know it's a lot. And I need to bring other veterans out here so they can experience the same thing. And so at that point, it just kind of started to build in the back of my mind, and over the next couple of years, came to fruition. But I realized how healing it was the following May. And the following May, I went to Lourdes with an organization called Warriors to Lourdes, which is another pilgrimage program for veterans. And I realized upon arrival that I didn't have a notebook. And I like carrying a notebook. I like keeping a journal of my pilgrimage experiences. I don't journal any other time in my life, but I always journal when I'm on pilgrimage. And went out, and it took me a few days to find just a simple notebook to journal my pilgrimage experiences while I was in Lourdes. And so I finally get my notebook and I get back and I sit down for the day and I write May 19th across the top of the page. And I thought, May 19th, that's an important day. Why is that an important day? It's not my birthday. It's not. I just start running down all the important days in my life. And for the life of me, I couldn't remember why it was an important day. And so I was like, okay, whatever. And I write out my day's thoughts. And I had been home from Lourdes for a few months before it dawned on me that why May 19th was such a significant day to me. So complete and thorough was the healing that I experienced at Cruz de Ferro that the most troublesome day of my life was basically completely absolved. And so that is my Camino transformation ultimate story.
I think we could stop the interview right there, because that is probably one of the most powerful Cruz de Ferro stories that I've ever heard.
So good.
Father Steven, we just want to thank you for your service, first of all, and recognize what you've given back to the country and also to the people that you served there in Iraq. I can't even imagine how fortunate they were to have you there with them. And knowing that you're a man of faith, I wonder if you could share with us, a lot of people talk about the magic of the Camino and about the power and the miracles that we see occur. What do you think specifically, why was the Cruz de Ferro so transforming for you? What was it about the walk up to that point? What do you think was the power there that helped you be able to transform in that moment as you laid down each of those stones?
It's interesting because the Cruz de Ferro is, I mean, it's an old tradition, right? I mean, it's been around for a while, but compared to the Camino itself, it's kind of a modern invention, right? When you look at the Camino itself, the Cruz de Ferro is much more recent than people walking the Camino. At the very earliest, it started to develop after the cathedral was completed, because people were carrying stones as a form of penance to the cathedral to contribute towards the building effort. And so when the cathedral was completed and the city of Santiago didn't want people just dumping stones in the streets, and they said, stop doing this. It was sometime after that people started leaving their stones on the highest peak that's actually along the Camino. Clearly, it's not the highest peak on the Camino or in Spain, but it's the highest one that's actually on the Frances. And then from that, someone decided to put a cross up. And so it's relatively, in comparison, it's relatively modern. But yet, as the Camino has grown, from the very beginning, when it was tens and hundreds and even thousands per year, and now it's thousands per day during the peak season. We have something that the Anglican former Bishop of Durham, N.T. Wright, he's now a professor. I don't remember where he goes from university to university. He was a professor in Oxford. He was a professor at Cambridge. Now he's a professor somewhere else. But he talks about, in one of his books that talks about the pilgrimage of Christian life in general. Mm-hmm. And he goes back and forth between physical pilgrimages and his concept of having an internal faith pilgrimage. And somewhere in there, he discusses the idea that ground, even that has not been officially recognized by anyone, because the church will go out and say, this is a holy site because we say so, right? Yeah. Which, sometimes that's legitimate. The Church of the Holy Nativity, for example, in Bethlehem, the place of Christ's birth, that's an important thing, and everybody's going to officially recognize that. But there is a different reality that through common use, people's faith has been enhanced in a particular location. And because that happens, then the next person does it, and then the next person does it. And all of the Camino, the entire I was about to say the entire route, but the entirety of multiple routes, because of course there's multiple, there's the Francés and the Primitivo and the Norte and the Portuguese and the alternative spiritual. You've got thousands of people walking, whether it's from a distinct, according to the tradition of the Camino, a distinct Christian understanding, or simply a more generalized spiritual understanding that's seeking the connection with the higher power. That's something that exceeds yourself. Yeah. And so, no church official has gone out and shook the holy water over every single step along the way. But yet the fact that thousands of people walk it and pray it every day has created sort of a de facto consecration of the route. And so there's a spiritual energy there that is created by the people who are seeking after that greater connection beyond themselves that energizes the Camino. And there's certain points along it, like the Cruz de Ferro, that are unique in their, like, okay, we've all been walking and praying, and maybe I was walking and praying for the next place to get something to eat, but the Cruz de Ferro is like, we're going to make a point of, this is where I leave burdens behind. And so there's this specialization or this uniqueness to the energy that you find there. And to me, it's a wonderful gift of God. Other people may view it differently, but it's, anyone who's paying attention cannot deny that there's just something different about being there.
Couldn't agree with you more. It's palpable. With every pilgrim you meet, whether they are believers in one thing or another, but there is an energy that is alive there and is felt, I feel like, no matter who you meet, that you walk along the side of that trail with. When you look back about your Caminos, what would you say were your biggest challenges? Everybody talks about there's the physical Camino. And I think, when you look on the forums and you see all the questions, it's always about what kind of backpack, what kind of shoes, tell me about the Band-Aids, should I take poles or should I not? But there's not a lot said about the inner struggles that also go along with it. And I just wonder, when you look at your own Caminos, where do you feel that you had the most challenge? Was it physically, or was it more the inner? And if so, whichever one it was, do you have any tips for people that might be watching this video to give them a little bit of a tip, so how they could know better to handle one of those challenges that you've faced?
Well, I'll start with saying I get so frustrated with those forum questions, because so many, the questions are just kind of shotgun blasted out there, and then and then whoever asked the question, typically because they're doing their best in good faith to get themselves prepared, end up getting shotgun blast replies that 99% of the time probably isn't going to apply to them, right? How should I train? And you get answers from, don't train at all the way up to these incredibly hard training regimens. Well, response number one is, what kind of condition are you in now? Right? Because that's gonna highly affect how much you need to train, and where and how. Like, are you just barely getting off the couch and need to start by walking around the block a couple times each day? Or are you already running marathons and really just need to get used to carrying a little bit of weight each day, right?
Yes. Yes.
You've got these nameless, faceless forums that everyone gives an answer from their own experience, and it's a great answer from their experience, but it may have nothing to do with what the person's asking.
Yes. There's also a lot of judgment that comes with some of those answers.
Sometimes, yeah. So the first thing I'll say is that I did what I think may be overly common problem among soldiers, at least, because I have found it in my pilgrims in the years thereafter, is I remember what I did in my peak and said, that's what I can do now. That's not true.
Yeah.
And so I went overloaded and undertrained.
Yeah.
I do have some back injuries, which limit the amount that I can carry. So my first Camino, I used a little trolley system that I got, which was brilliant. It's a great device, but it invited carrying way more weight than I should have because it was all behind me. It was all being supported by this trolley system. Well, when you're walking on the flat ground, it was brilliant. I could just fly across country, right? Because
Yeah.
I had probably 40 pounds of garbage and another 10 pounds of things that I actually needed, but it only felt like 3 or 4 pounds connected to my waist. So I could just pull and pull and pull and pull and pull until I got to Galicia and was trying to pull all that weight up a mountainside. And it killed me. Yeah, oh, it was horrible. So take everything that you think that you need and throw it all away, and show up with a couple of changes of socks and just enjoy a nice light pack is my advice for that. And actually walk every day. Go out and walk every day. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot. As long as you're used to walking every day, your body will adjust to the different distances and things like that. But I definitely did. I definitely showed up way overloaded and undertrained, and it was harsh. It was a rude awakening. With that recognition, the part about internally, I joined the Army when I was 17 years old, and I left when I was 48, and I didn't know any other life. And so it was a lot of deep down soul searching as to what it even meant to not be in the Army. And God would give me answers, and I didn't necessarily like them very much.
That's what you asked for, right?
So yeah, it's if you ask questions, you have to be willing to hear answers. And I was intellectually, but I wasn't necessarily emotionally. And so that was this internal tug of war. It's like, yeah, you really need to hear this. Yeah, but I don't want to. But you really need to. But I don't want to.
Did you practice any type of daily rituals that you think helped with that inner work?
I celebrate the Mass every day. So that's huge. And sometimes that really was encouraging, and sometimes it was really challenging, depending on what I was wrestling with that any particular day. But that's how I start the day.
And when you were doing your own Caminos, did you invite other people, like when you would get ready to celebrate Mass, or was this just something personally you would do?
I would do it personally, and then people would end up kind of walking up and joining in ad hoc.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny. In a recent Camino, I was celebrating the Mass at the Cruz de Ferro. It was a couple years ago, and I like getting there at sunrise. I like getting everything set up and then starting the celebration of the Mass right as the sun is coming up. And it's just beautiful. It's very moving. And so I was there. I was at the little picnic table. I was celebrating the Mass, and these two ladies came over and joined in. And when we were complete, they're just absolutely sobbing. And one of them says, I saw you over here in your vestments. And I thought, that can't be real. I'm hallucinating. And she goes, then I heard you praying. I'm like, oh, he's really celebrating the Mass. I ran over and joined in. And so and people who join in, that's a great, it's a great addition as far as I'm concerned. It happens more often than not every day. Cruz de Ferro, almost guaranteed that someone's going to come over and join in. The Church at Ocebrero, you're guaranteed people are going to join in. And then the other locations, it really depends on where I am set up and how visible it is. If I've got access to a church, the more likely people join in than if I'm set up, like I'll set up in the courtyard of an albergue and celebrate the Mass. It's interesting. If I set up in the courtyard of an albergue, maybe a person will join in, maybe a person won't. Most people are just busy trying to get dressed and get out, right? They want to race to their next albergue. But if I'm set up in a church, you're guaranteed people are going to join in. There's a beautiful little church in Buente that I've had the ability to celebrate there a few times. And the parish priest there is also a former Army chaplain from, I think it's Colombia, and then he immigrated to Spain. And so when I'm there, he'll get up early and join me for the Mass, and whoever happens to walk by, because you turn the lights on, you open the door, people come in.
Yeah. Wow. I just think how fortunate some of those pilgrims have been to stumble upon you as you're getting ready to celebrate Mass. And then also just thinking myself on those hardest days, what that must have been like to know that you yourself are going through inner struggle, and then all of a sudden you're back on the job, right? And you're serving once again, even though you've had maybe a difficult day walking. So how special that you can still be so giving during a time when you're really on a personal journey, and shows a lot about you.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the celebrating of the Mass in the morning that's energizing. That's a thing. And the more people who join in, the more energizing it is. It is more difficult at the end of the day if I've met somebody and like we can talk and walk, but once I like start scrubbing my clothes and try to look for something to eat, at that point I really just want to be left alone.
Exactly. You need your personal time, right?
You're
still a human at the end of the day. Well, I know that we've probably run over a little bit on this, but I wanted to make sure we give Corey a chance to ask any follow-up questions or anything that maybe she's curious about before we finish up.
I had a quick question on just your experiences. When you look back on your experiences, what was maybe one of your highest points? I mean, I know you've talked about some of the amazing experiences that you've had, but what would be your highest point, or something that you can think about during all of the experiences that you've had? Is there any one that sticks out for you?
Well, I'll tell you, on the first trip, it was just, it really took me by surprise. And so it was a high point. It could have been the lowest point of the entire Camino, and it ended up just getting flipped on its head by the person I was walking with. And I told you already, I had the trolley system, and I was way overloaded, and I'm pulling it up the sides of these Galician mountains, and I'm exhausted, and I'm going more and more slowly. And so the person I'm walking with, a young German university student, a brilliant young lady that was proving to herself that she could walk across the country. And we met in Astorga. I had been walking with a man from the Netherlands for a couple days. We got to Astorga. He was tired. He wanted to quit, and and this young lady was there, and she was fiddling with her pack, getting ready to go. And I asked her, you know, you interested in walking with somebody or no? And oh yeah, we can walk and talk for a while. And so we ended up walking together for the remainder of the trip. And the first few days I kept up, but then after that I couldn't keep up anymore. And she just kept slowing down. And so I told her a few times, it's like, don't slow down for me. You know, I've got no schedule. You've got a schedule. By that point, I knew that as soon as the Camino was over, she was going back and her semester was starting for the next semester. And she's like, oh, no, I'm fine. And she made up all these excuses why she was willing to walk more slowly. But we were going up this really steep incline. And like I said, I'm overloaded. I'm undertrained. I'm exhausted. Just, you know, in the Army, you say you're sucking air. You're just like breathing so incredibly hard. And the connection on the trolley broke. And so all of a sudden one side comes loose and I'm stopped, and I look at this system and try to figure out how I'm going to do a trail side repair. And I looked at her and I said, you know, it's all been great and everything. I've appreciated your company and conversation the last few days, but at this point you really need to go, because I've got no idea how long this is going to take for me to fix. If I can get it fixed, best case scenario, this is like hours behind schedule, and it's already getting late in the day. And she reaches into her pack and she pulls out a sleeve of the Spanish equivalent of Oreos and tears it open, and she goes, here, have a cookie. And she's like, I don't know, I'll wait, it's fine.
Aww.
And so I sat down and I figured out, and actually, I mean, it took some time. I think it probably took me about 30 minutes or so. But it didn't take as long as I anticipated figuring out how to repair it. And then we did not go as far as we had anticipated that day, but we were able to get to a place to stop. And when we got there, one of the other pilgrims, who was also grossly overloaded, but he was more physically fit than I was, had just half his pack was filled with anticipated repair equipment. And so between stuff that I got from him, the little bit of that I had kind of jury rigged on the side of the trail, I was able to get my trolley functional again, and continue on for a few more days. And then it had a catastrophic fail, and I ended up leaving it at an albergue, taking my gear loose from it. Of course, it had no straps or anything. It didn't have shoulder straps or anything. It was just a bag on the trolley. So at that point, I was reduced to be relying on a Jacotrans to transport my gear for the last few days.
Wow.
But just that willingness, you know, to say, no, I'm not in a hurry. I can do this with you, and you know, well, if you need to work on that, I can wait. And I was feeling so incredibly low when my equipment failed. And you know, this weird thing of her just handing me this cookie and like, here, have a cookie and fix your stuff and we're fine.
I love that so
It
much.
completely flipped the event.
What a great experience. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, Father, I think we could talk to you all day about your pilgrimages, but I know that we probably have to bring this video to a close. So I just want to thank you so much for spending this time with us today and sharing your stories. And of course, thanking you again for your service. And I love what you're doing to give back to the Camino, which we'll talk about in our next video with you. But thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.